New York was beautiful that morning. The air had that crisp, early spring bite to it, but the sunlight was warm enough to keep the streets buzzing. Street vendors were already shouting over one another, the smell of roasting pretzels and hot coffee drifting through the air. I'd grabbed my favorite spot at a little diner on 7th Avenue, a window seat where you could watch the endless parade of humanity go by. Tourists snapping photos, kids chasing pigeons, an old man playing saxophone near the subway entrance. Marie, the waitress, slid my coffee onto the table. "You look like you're waiting on someone." I shrugged. "Nah, just people watching." The morning felt perfect, the kind of perfect that made you forget the city could turn ugly in an instant. I took a slow sip, savoring it. Across the street, a group of teenagers were laughing so hard one of them nearly dropped his phone. A taxi swerved past, the driver shouting curses in 3 languages. A woman in a bright yellow coat was feeding crumbs to a pair of stubborn pigeons who refused to move. Then something small caught my attention. Just a shape, at first, moving oddly through the crowd. Someone tall, wearing a dark coat, drifting between people without ever touching them. They didn't break stride, didn't even look around, and no one else seemed to notice them at all. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe my brain was just picking out some random pedestrian and making them seem strange because I'd been sitting here too long. Marie came back with my food, and I pushed the thought away. But when I looked back through the window, the tall figure was gone, and in its place was a woman, standing perfectly still in the middle of the sidewalk, staring straight at me through the glass. At first, I thought she might just be looking past me. Her face was unreadable. No frown, no smile, just that blank, patient stare. She wasn't blinking much either. I shifted in my seat, glancing behind me, but the diner was half empty. She had to be looking at me. Car honked. People brushed past her, muttering, bumping her shoulder, but she didn't move, didn't even flinch. "Friend of yours?" Marie asked, leaning over with the coffee pot. I shook my head quickly. Never seen her before. When I looked again, she was gone. A little shiver ran through me, but I forced a laugh and dug into my eggs. This was New York. Plenty of weird people on the street at any given time. I'd seen a guy in a wedding dress playing the drums in the rain once. Compared to that, a staring woman was nothing. Still, I caught myself checking the window every few minutes. By the time I paid the bill, the morning rush had swelled outside. Tourists with cameras, locals on their phones, delivery guys weaving through the mess. Everything felt normal again. I stepped onto the sidewalk, breathing in that mix of exhaust, coffee, and street food. My plan was simple: wander to the bookstore, maybe hit Central Park later. But about a block down, I froze. The same woman was leaning against a lamppost, head tilted slightly like she was listening to something. Her eyes locked on mine instantly, and this time she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a slow curling of the lips, as if she'd been waiting for me to notice. A delivery truck rolled between us. When it passed, she was gone again. I kept walking, telling myself not to look for her. It was probably just some weirdo messing with me. Or worse, I'd imagined it and was starting to look like the crazy one. The city swallowed me up in its noise. Taxis honking, street performers banging on buckets, a kid crying somewhere in the crowd. I let it all wash over me, tried to focus on anything else. The bookstore was only a few blocks away. I ducked inside, the familiar scent of paper and ink wrapping around me. I browsed aimlessly, thumbing through a crime novel, trying to shake the unease that kept clinging to the back of my neck. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but for some reason I answered. Nothing, just a faint crackling, like static, but underneath it, something else. A whisper, just soft enough that I couldn't make out the words. "Hello," I said, voice low. The whisper stopped. Then, very clearly, a woman's voice came through. "Don't trust the dead." The line went dead. I stood there, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. A customer brushed past me, muttering an apology, and I realized my pulse was racing. I shoved the phone in my pocket and headed for the door. Outside, the street was quieter than before. No, not just quieter, emptier. A few people still moved along the sidewalks, but they weren't talking, weren't looking at their phones. They were all just walking, slowly. And at the end of the block, that same woman in the dark coat stood perfectly still, head tilted, smiling like she'd been waiting all day. Only this time, there were 3 more people standing behind her. And all of them were smiling the same way. Something in my gut told me to turn around, walk away, pretend none of this was happening. But they were already moving. The woman in the dark coat stepped forward first, her movements deliberate, as if she had all the time in the world. The others followed a beat later, each in perfect sync, weaving through the emptying street without breaking their gaze from me. I forced myself to keep a steady pace, not wanting to run. Not yet. Then I saw it. The man closest to her, an older guy in a rumpled suit, had a hole in the side of his head. A perfect circle, clean through the temple, like someone had put a gun to it. His skin around the wound was gray, cracked, and dry. Another woman shuffled forward, her jaw hanging a little too loose, like the bone was barely holding on. They weren't just weird strangers. They were wrong. I picked up my pace. My heartbeat was in my ears now, drowning out the city noise. A hot dog cart sat abandoned at the curb, steam still rising from the grill. No vendor in sight. By the time I reached the next intersection, I risked a glance back. They were closer. Not running, not even speed walking, just closing the distance like the street itself was bending toward them. One of them tilted his head, and I swear I heard something, wet and sharp, tear inside his neck as it moved. That was it. I ran. I tore down the side street, weaving between trash bags and delivery vans, cutting through an alley toward the subway entrance. I didn't care where it went. I just needed to be underground, away from sight. But when I rounded the corner, I froze. The subway stairs yawned open in front of me, and at the bottom, lit by flickering fluorescent light, stood the same woman in the dark coat, smiling. Her smile didn't move, but her eyes followed me like a predator deciding where to bite first. The flickering lights above made her skin look even more wrong. Stretched too tight, pale in some spots, almost bruised in others. I stepped back, heart pounding, but a sound behind me froze my legs. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, wet. I turned just enough to see the others from the street drifting into the alley. Their bodies jerked in tiny, unnatural movements, shoulders popping, fingers twitching, as if the act of walking was something they were learning in real time. The woman in the coat tilted her head toward me, then toward the subway, and they all came at once. I bolted down the stairs, my footsteps echoing through the tiled tunnel. The air was thick, damp, and smelled faintly of rot. Somewhere far below, I could hear a train rumbling, but then silence. The rumble cut out. The flicker of the lights slowed until they went black entirely. For a few seconds, I stood there in the dark, chest heaving. Then the loudspeakers crackled to life. This is a nationwide emergency alert. Do not approach or interact with any person showing signs of unresponsiveness or visible injury. Repeat. Do not trust the dead. The voice was mechanical, almost calm, but it kept looping over and over, bouncing off the walls. From somewhere deeper in the tunnel came the sound of dozens of bare feet slapping wet tile, getting closer. The loudspeaker kept looping, that cold voice bouncing around the tunnel until it felt like it was inside my skull. I pulled out my phone, half expecting it to be useless, but it lit up instantly, and my notifications exploded. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, every app was flooded. Hashtags were trending in all caps. Hashtag Don't Trust the Dead. Hashtag Emergency Alert. Hashtag Stay Inside. On Twitter, videos from all over the country were already going viral. One showed a man in Los Angeles waving at someone across the street, only for that person to tilt their head at an unnatural angle before sprinting full speed at the camera. Another was from Chicago, shaky footage of a train pulling into a station, filled with motionless passengers, all staring out the windows, smiling. YouTube's homepage was chaos. Live streams with titles like Dead Walking in Times Square and Bodies Not Bodies were pulling in millions of viewers in minutes. Comments were racing by too fast to read. Instagram stories were worse. Clips of loved ones standing in kitchens or hallways, not blinking, smiling that same smile. Some ended with screams. My signal flickered. The videos froze. The notifications slowed, then stopped. The lights overhead flickered back to life for a moment, just enough for me to see movement ahead. They were in the tunnel now. Dozens of them, shoulder to shoulder, faces fixed on me. The woman in the dark coat was at the front. Her head tilted, smile wider than before. And over my phone's frozen screen, one last notification blinked through. You're being watched. The tunnel filled with the sound of bare feet hitting tile. Faster now, echoing toward me. I turned and ran, taking the stairs two at a time, until daylight blasted my eyes. The street above was pure chaos. People were sprinting in every direction, some shoving each other to get away, others frozen in shock as those things moved through the crowd, grabbing and tearing without hesitation. A man in a suit tackled one of the creatures, only for it to whip around and bite straight into his throat. He didn't even get a scream out before blood sprayed the side of a bus. A yellow cab swerved onto the sidewalk, smashing into a fire hydrant. Steam and water exploded into the air as more screams rose from the other side of the street. Cars burned in the distance, black smoke rising between the skyscrapers. I saw a woman try to pull her child from a stroller, but before she could lift him out, two smiling men in hospital gowns dragged her backward into the crowd. Someone grabbed my arm. Move! I barely had time to register the man's face before he yanked me between two buildings, shoving open a metal service door. We slipped inside and slammed it shut just as heavy footsteps thudded past outside. I leaned against the wall, gasping. Where the hell are we? Food storage, he panted. Back of a market. We've been hiding here since the first alert. In the dim light, I saw shelves stacked high with canned goods, sacks of rice, boxes of water bottles. A few other survivors huddled near the back, wide-eyed, silent. The man locked the door with a heavy bolt and looked at me. You didn't see the worst of it yet. And then, from outside, we heard it. Hundreds of footsteps moving together, slowly, in perfect unison. The bolt clicked into place, and the room seemed to exhale. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Finally, the man who'd pulled me in, mid-30s, scruffy beard, jacket half-zipped, sat on a crate and ran a hand down his face. My name's Ryan, he said quietly. You've seen them, right? I nodded, still catching my breath. Yeah, I muttered. I don't even know what to call them. One of the women in the back corner spoke up. Don't call them people. She was older, maybe late 50s, wearing a supermarket apron. Her eyes had the kind of tired I'd only seen on people who'd been through war. They're not people anymore, she said. Not since this morning. My husband. She stopped, swallowed hard. He died 2 days ago. Heart attack. This morning, he was at the door, smiling like nothing happened. Ryan leaned forward, lowering his voice. It's not just here. I was watching a live stream from London before the power started going. Same thing there. Same smiles. The dead are walking, but they're not rotting, not falling apart. It's like they're using what's left. Another man near the shelves muttered. I saw one bite a guy in the neck. He went down screaming. Less than a minute later, he stood up. Same smile. A silence settled in. Outside, those slow, synchronized footsteps scraped past the alley. Ryan finally said what we were all thinking. They're not hunting at random. They're organized. And they know who they're looking for. His eyes locked on me when he said it.